Next presenter, rather, is Rivita Bordes. She is studying a joint honors degree in religion and local diversity with folklore studies at University College Cork. They previously studied a visual arts degree in the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp. They combine their academic, practical understanding of spirituality with art practice to channel these visions translated into poetry and illustration. This board has traveled abroad for 3 years in between their 2 degrees. In this time, they also completed a 100-hour permaculture design course and explored different eco-villages and life in community with respect for the earth. Desbordes intends to travel more during their studies and inform their academic and artistic work with different spiritual practices, which they will encounter. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Just share my screen. Brilliant. So this project that I'm presenting today was originally composed of black ink pen illustrations in a travel science book, often reflecting on visions I had in dreams and meditations and on poem and on the risen sentences. It began in a critical phase of my life where all my projection, my dreams, and the thick solid of my structure, of my ego structure collapsed, catalyzed by psychedelic experiences where the material world unfolded itself before my eyes, leaving me to ponder on these anguishing questions: who am I and what I is? So the influences of this work. So the first one is The Dark Night of the Soul, which is a poem by Saint John of the Cross, 16th century Spanish Roman priest and mystic, and his poem. So I'll just read a quick extract. O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that has united the lover with his beloved, transforming the beloved into his lover. So this was an inspiration to the title of the popular spiritual book, Dark Nights of the Soul, a guide to finding your own way through life's ordeal, by psychotherapist and former monk Thomas More. So the book gives guidance on how to navigate through the period now often referred to as Dark Nights of the Soul in psychology, where individual goes through transcendent or mystical experience and has yet to reconcile the state of unity and ego dissolution to their mundane life and experience of duality, conflict, and confusion. For me, the Dark Night of the Soul was a phase of liminality between revelations and doubts, depression and ecstasy, belonging and estrangements, light and darkness, insight and madness. So the artwork was originally in this travel journal format that I showed here in the picture. So you can see there's like a black papers and white ink and vice versa. I eventually started to scan these illustrations and make prints from them. So another inspiration is actually William Blake's Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where St. John of the Cross poetry comprised elements of bridal mysticism. The marriage that William Blake refers to here is one unifying not necessarily the individual to God, but the devil and God within each of us. So William Blake's poetry and artwork borrows biblical elements and contains element of symbolic as well as visionary art. My next inspiration, which was probably the most central one, which I would almost consider a Bible, was Carl Jung's Red Book, or Liber Novus. So the marriage of heaven and hell, of goddess and demons, is in turn a motif in Carl Jung's journal, which is an illustrated manuscript which Jung spent the later decades of his life working on without actually ever intending to publish it. So this was the central inspiration to my projects, the compelling images and the details of his journey into landscapes of dreams, as well as various encounters with entities, occasionally with madness, completely amazing. I felt that the book really guided me through my own journey, peopled by many figures of darkness and light. The next one then, which was pretty central, was Dreaming the Dark from Starhawk. She's an ecofeminist and neo-pagan writer, and through her writing, my experience of embracing the dark, which until then had been personal and experienced through a psychological lens, gained a political and sociological dimension. She says, we need to dream the dark as a process and dream the dark as change, to create the dark in a new image, because the dark creates us. Starhawk argues that the patriarchal lens under which our history, which perpetuates the divide into light and dark, sacred and profane, spirit and flesh, and may be rooted in interpretations of the creation story of the Genesis, where God separates the light from the dark, and where humans are considered to be the pinnacle of creation. The light is associated with the heavens, with God, with the male principle, whereas the dark is the earth, the devil, and the female principle. The evolution of this ideology, Starhawk believes, came to eventually legitimize the rule of whites over those of dark skin, of male over female, and of humans over the earth. Even though people no longer believe in a white male God, the institutions of our society still embody this image in their structure. Starhawk warns us, beware of organizations that proclaim their devotion to the light without embracing, bowing to the dark. For when they idealize one half of the world, they must devalue the rest. This gave a whole new resonance on my journey through the darkness of the soul, and their exploration felt so sublime that I decided to give this oxymoronic title of Bright Night of the Soul, which illustrates the beauty of the dark, the feminine, the womb, the mystery, which was slowly reconciling within my own body and in my relationship with my mother, as well as with Mother Earth. So next are the illustrations and the poetry. So Vision is the first illustration, and it illustrates a common occurring visual akin to a vortex, sometimes perceived as eyes, which I commonly see. I later saw other depictions of it, actually, notably by the famous visionary artist Alex Gray. In this illustration, the eyes on the outer layers of the spiral in the drawing are wary and their gaze seems straight. But moving to the center of the spiral, the eyes progressively look towards the light source in the center and move. This is accompanied actually by a poem called I Realize, which I'll just read 2 stanzas from. I realize how dark the receptacle of my soul had been kept for the past years, and how deprived of love and gratitude I've been. I've been hammering my brain for experience, for thrill, for life itself had slipped away from my body and senses. So the next one, which I call Muladhara, it depicts a state of alienation, disembodiment, and confusion. It represents me in the initial state of my journey, shedding light on the discomfort and misalignment I was experiencing. My body being upside down, entirely uprooted. I've called it Muladhara or root chakra, as a lot of my practice back then was centered around healing this energy center. So the next artwork is the deep dive. It's a representation of myself in Anubhitsasana, from Anubhita meaning found or obtained, and Asana meaning posture. Here I try to illustrate the whole awakening of the spinal cord with arborescent patterns and hidden eyes along the spine. This posture, often called the drop back in English, is both physically and emotionally challenging and feels like a leap of faith, a deep dive in unknown territory, and an awakening of deep dark forces in which one needs to plunge wholeheartedly and vulnerably. So the next artwork, Emotional Tide, is a double illustration. So there's one representation of myself in another Ashtanga posture in the first series called Setu Bandhasana, next to a knot loosening up. So the knots here are psychosomatic, and the idea that it loosens up portrays the healing potential of the asana practice. The motif of knots also appears consistently in my work, and in fact, my name Rivka is possibly rooted in Arabic, meaning a cord with a noose or to tie firmly. The energy structure of the trio of life in the Kabbalah is composed of sephirot, which are also sometimes referred to as knots. In the God Who Binds from Mircea Eliade's Images and Symbol, he highlights that in the cosmos, as well as in human life, everything is connected to everything else in an invisible way. And secondly, that certain divinities are the mistresses of these threads, which constitute ultimately the vast cosmic bondage. He then notes that the etymology in several linguistic families of the act of tying also serves to express bewitching. Eliade concludes that the ambivalence and heterogeneity of the motifs of binding or knots, and also deliverance from bonds, show again how multiple and various are the planes on which the archetypes have been realized. My next illustration is Atlantic Abyss, for which I wrote an eponymous poem in my next slide. It depicts an experience of complete ego dissolution during my first time seeing the Atlantic Ocean in Portugal. I have here personified the ocean as an entity, receiving my tears, emotional turmoil, and facilitating catharsis. Just reading one stanza from the poem here. I bow to you, whose only end is a horizon, where all shells and fears are brought back to the shore, broken and humbled, for you are fear itself. And in the breaking of your waters, you have birthed me again. So I make this long phrase for you as a humble letter addressed to me. In this illustration source, the water is contrasting with the Atlantic's turbulence and symbolizing, next slide. So in this illustration, the source, the water contrast is with the more chaotic and water of the ocean. This one is called source or imbas Barhaldai in Old Irish, which translates to the knowledge or inspiration that illumines, which was often attributed to poets, to druids, and to Philae in Irish medieval literature. The next one then, which is the one I personally feel very close to, is ethereal subject. And it was inspired by an anecdote during a Vipassana retreat, where we were told that if our enterprise was similar to a surgery, and if we were to leave in the middle of the whole process, then we would be completely opened up, so we needed to stay for the entire journey. So this depicts me kind of investigating into emotional and physical wounds in a sort of calm and equanimous manner. The next one then is Era, which means Ireland in Irish. I started it when I first came to Ireland, and I finished it 6 months later in the airport, about to leave to a different continent. I wanted to depict the forest as alive, but also as watching over me, but also watching my actions. I was completing St. Patrick's pilgrimage in the north of Ireland when I had this deep experience of being watched by the trees, which made me weep and realize how I had been at war with nature, with my mother, with my femininity, with the dark and subtle power of these still energy beings who outlive all other life forms. It inspired reverence, fear, and a sensation that I needed to live closer to the more than human world and closer to my values in a way that would honor life. The next one then, which parallels Era, is the inner forest, and it depicts the nuns as an upside-down tree, a symbol used by alchemist Robert Flood, where the letters of the name of God in Judaism, Yud He Vav He, are inscribed along the trunk or trachea, where the ruach, the spirit or breath in Hebrew, can navigate between the inner and outer worlds, between the individual's body and the cosmic body, between the depth of the earth and the heavenly skies. The next one, World Womb, depicts the worldly on the right and the otherworldly on the left nature of the divine. It also shows the personal and universal understanding of birth and of the world. I depicted the umbilical cord, which can also be seen as the silken cord, since it also depicts the astral plane, binding the world and the self through a knot. The poem in the following slide, Pregnant with Love, refers to this illustration. In the midst of night, as the indiscriminating darkness was enveloping my soul. I felt belonging to this world and got pregnant with love, whom was pregnant with me, just as I birthed the earth, who herself birthed me. The last one then of this presentation is Mer Méditerranée. So it's kind of a play on word from the body of water of my native land. Mer, which is sea in French, is here replaced with Mer, M-E-R-E, which means mother. I am held in her womb. It is peaceful, and the ripples are like subtle vibrations of love radiating through my body. I have finally made it home. That's it. Thank you for listening. And